If you think witchcraft is fantasy, you're missing the real story. It was never about supernatural power. It was always about control, and that control still exists. Why ancient knowledge was deliberately hidden. There's a reason witchcraft became synonymous with evil. Not because it was dangerous in the way you think, but because it was dangerous to systems that required obedience. What we call witchcraft today was once something completely different. It was applied observation, pattern recognition, understanding how human behavior responds to specific triggers, environments, and repetitions. It wasn't mystical. It was functional. For thousands of years, certain individuals understood that reality operates on invisible principles. They knew that timing mattered, that lunar cycles affected plant chemistry, animal behavior, and human mood. They knew that repeated phrases in heightened emotional states created lasting psychological changes. They knew that scent, sound, color, and gesture could induce predictable mental states. This wasn't superstition. This was empirical knowledge gathered through generations of careful observation. It worked. And that was the problem. Because knowledge of this kind creates autonomy, it creates power outside institutional control. When people understand how perception works, how attention works, how symbols and repetition shape behavior, they become harder to manage, harder to predict, harder to exploit. So this knowledge had to be destroyed. It had to be reframed as evil, as dangerous, as delusional. The narrative became, anyone practicing this is in league with darkness. The punishment became death. But here's what almost no one notices. The knowledge never actually disappeared. It was simply transferred, rebranded. Today, the same principles once called witchcraft are applied by industries worth trillions. Behavioral psychology, persuasive design, neuromarketing, algorithmic recommendation systems, habit engineering. The methods changed. The structure didn't. You're still being influenced by patterns you never consciously agreed to, by symbols that bypass your rational mind, by repetitions that shape your choices without your awareness. And this opens something most people aren't ready to face. If witchcraft was always about understanding and applying invisible patterns to create visible results, then what's stopping you from using it now? What's stopping you from taking back control of your own attention, your own behavior, your own outcomes? Nothing, except the story they embedded in your mind to ensure you'd never even try. If this resonates, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. How belief systems engineer reality. Most people think belief is just opinion, a personal preference, a philosophical position. But belief is architecture. It's the framework through which every piece of information gets filtered, interpreted, and transformed into action. When you believe something deeply, your brain doesn't question it anymore. It just confirms it over and over. That's not weakness. That's efficiency. Your mind is designed to seek confirmation, not contradiction. Ancient practitioners understood this better than modern science does. They knew that if you could install a belief deep enough, it would become self-fulfilling. Not through magic, through behavior. If someone believed they were cursed, they would act cursed. Their posture would change. Their decisions would change. Their health would deteriorate. Not because of supernatural forces. Because belief alters biology. It alters stress hormones, immune function, sleep quality, risk assessment. A belief strong enough becomes indistinguishable from reality. But here's what gets unsettling. You didn't choose most of your beliefs. They were chosen for you. Before you could think critically, you absorbed beliefs from parents, teachers, media, culture, religion. Beliefs about what's possible, what's acceptable, what's safe, what's dangerous. These beliefs weren't installed through conversation. They were installed through repetition, through emotional conditioning, through reward and punishment, through stories told over and over until they became invisible background truth. And this is where it gets dark. Every institution that wants to control behavior starts by controlling belief. If you believe you're powerless, you won't resist. If you believe you need permission, you'll wait forever. If you believe change is impossible, you won't even attempt it. These aren't accidents. These are installations. Deliberate, systematic, invisible. So the real question isn't whether belief shapes reality. It does. The question is, Whose beliefs are you carrying? When you say, can't, is that actually true? Or is that an old program running automatically because someone needed you to stay small? And if it's a program, when do you decide to uninstall it? Comment below if this ever crossed your mind before. What happens when you recognize the pattern? Patterns are everywhere, in nature, in behavior, in language, in social dynamics. Once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. And that's when things shift. Because patterns that operate invisibly have power. Patterns that are recognized lose it. This is the core principle that ancient witchcraft operated on. Not spells, not spirits. Pattern recognition followed by pattern disruption. Think about advertising. Every commercial follows a pattern. Create desire, create inadequacy, offer solution. Once you recognize the pattern, the commercial stops working. You see through it. The same applies to manipulation in relationships, in politics, in media narratives. There's always a pattern. Problem, reaction, solution, fear, confusion, savior, threat, urgency, compliance. These patterns work because most people never learn to spot them. But what comes next is more disturbing than you'd expect. You yourself are following patterns. Patterns you didn't design. Your daily routine is a pattern. Your emotional reactions are patterns. Your self-sabotage is a pattern. Your relationships replay the same conflicts in slightly different contexts. Pattern. The life you're living right now is largely the result of unconscious patterns running on autopilot. And those patterns were installed by someone else. This is where the ancient knowledge becomes uncomfortably relevant. If you can identify a pattern, you can interrupt it. If you can interrupt it, you can replace it. This is what rituals were actually for. Not to summon entities, to disrupt old patterns and install new ones. The candle, the words, the gestures, none of that had inherent power. They had procedural power. They created a break in routine, a moment where the old pattern stopped and a new one could begin. And here's what changes everything. You don't need ancient tools to do this. You just need awareness. The moment you catch yourself repeating an unwanted pattern, stop, pause, do something different, anything different. That interruption is the crack in the program. That's where reprogramming becomes possible. Pattern recognition is the real magic. Everything else is just theater. If this content helps, hit the like button. It keeps this channel going. How language casts spells without permission. Words are not neutral. They never were. Every word carries weight, history, emotional charge, and behavioral instruction. When someone speaks to you, they're not just transmitting information. They're attempting to install a response, a feeling, a belief, a decision. Language is code, and most people run that code without ever examining it. This was always understood by those who held power. Kings used language to command loyalty. Priests used language to instruct obedience. Merchants used language to create desire. Witches used language to alter states of consciousness. Today, copywriters use language to drive purchases. Politicians use language to manufacture consent. Algorithms use language to keep you scrolling. The tools evolved. The mechanics didn't. But here's where it becomes personal. The language you use with yourself is the most powerful spell you're under. Every time you say, can't, you're reinforcing neural pathways that support limitation. Every time you say, I'm not good at, you're encoding identity. Every time you say, I always, you're predicting and therefore creating your own future. Your self-talk isn't commentary, it's programming. It's a continuous loop of instructions your nervous system follows automatically. And the most disturbing part, most of your self-talk isn't originally yours. It's the voice of a parent, a teacher, bully, culture. It's internalized criticism, internalized shame, internalized limitation. You've been speaking someone else's language to yourself for so long. You think it's your own voice, but it's not. It's an echo, and echoes can be silenced. This is the real forbidden knowledge. If language programs consciousness, then changing your language changes your reality. Not metaphorically, literally. New words create new thoughts. New thoughts create new feelings. New feelings create new actions. New actions create new results. This isn't positive thinking. This is linguistic engineering, and it's been used on you since birth. The question is whether you're ready to use it on yourself, intentionally, for outcomes you actually choose. What you can do starting right now: you don't need permission. You don't need initiation. You don't need secret knowledge. You just need clarity about how attention, repetition, language, and state work together. And you can start applying this immediately with nothing but awareness and consistency. First, identify one specific outcome you want. Not vague, not someday, something concrete you can measure within 90 days. Write it down in present tense as if it already exists. This isn't wishful thinking. It's neural priming. Your brain processes statements about the future differently than statements about the present. Present tense statements activate motivation pathways more directly. Second, find a trigger object. Something you can place where you'll see it multiple times daily. It doesn't matter what it is: a stone, card, a specific image. What matters is that every time you see it, it reminds you of your chosen outcome. This bypasses conscious effort. Your unconscious mind will register that object dozens of times a day and begin reorganizing priorities around the associated intention. Third, build a minimum daily protocol. 5 minutes. Same time every day if possible. During those 5 minutes, restate your outcome, visualize one concrete step toward it, and take one physical action, no matter how small. The action matters more than the duration. Repetition builds pathway. Pathway builds automation. Automation builds result. Fourth, watch for self-sabotage. Every time doubt shows up, every time resistance appears, pause and ask where it's coming from. Almost always, it's old programming. Someone else's voice telling you what you can't do. When you name it, when you recognize it as an installed belief rather than objective truth, it loses grip. When you act despite it, you override it. This isn't mysticism. This is applied behavioral science. This is what high performers in every field already do, whether they call it that or not. They call it discipline, focus, mental training. But the structure is identical to what witchcraft always was: deliberate use of invisible principles to generate visible outcomes. You don't have to believe it, you just have to test it. And when it works, you'll understand it was always available. You were just never taught to look. If this video shifted something, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you catch what's next. Comment which part hit you hardest.